forward and back, and there's a pointer.
Well, good morning. I'd like to talk about managing mites in red raspberry. Most of you know two-spotted spider mite, but actually there's other species of spider mites that can be on your raspberries. There can be, besides two-spotted spider mite, yellow spider mite, McDaniel spider mite, and the European red mite. Of all those four, though, two-spotted spider mite and the yellow spider mite are the most common. And they can actually cohabitate leaves. Here you can see a picture. Here you can see a picture of both species. Here you have two-spotted spider mite here, and down here you have the yellow mite. Yellow mite's a little bit smaller, so there are some differences in biology and morphology between these mites. And this is going to help you determine how to manage these two. Let's look at, or let's compare the biology between the yellow spider mite and the two-spotted spider mite. Okay, the yellow spider mite is much smaller, and one of the most key things about the yellow spider mite is that it likes cool weather. So you're going to see it early in the season. Also, they're going to, of course, emerge earlier then. They lay fewer eggs than the two-spotted spider mite. They're a little bit slower to develop than two-spot, and they have less webbing than the two-spotted spider mite. Both of them, however, have the same type of feeding damage. Here you can see their mouth parts. It's a stylet. They're going to stick it into the plant cells and suck the chlorophyll. And that creates a stippling pattern on the leaves, and that's your first sign that there's something there. Of course, usually they come out before you can see some of this stippling. So if you're really out there monitoring your plants, the best way to do it would be go along and take leaves around mid-height, sometimes up a little bit, particularly because the yellow spider mite is going to come out first, and they're going to go for these new canes, new cane growth. Look at the damage here caused by yellow spider mite. So they're going up for these new canes. Look at the stippling differences here in two-spotted spider mite versus the yellow spider mite. You can see here that it's kind of a more it's a light color, overall light color, and just little speckles all over. But the yellow spider mite tend to want to feed between those veins. Remember, they're smaller. They're kind of contained, like in little corrals between those veins. So you're going to see this darken up and become even more harsh yellow as the season passes on. So oftentimes the damage that you'll see will be a yellowing of these upper canopy leaves. This gives you an idea of the seasonality between the two different spider mites. You can see how your, You can see how your yellow spider mite has kind of like a split season. You'll have higher populations here and here during the cool during the cool periods of the year of the season. But two-spotted spider mite is pretty wherever that is. Two-spotted spider mite is going to last from early in the season on through about here, but they're going to like the hot, drier temperatures more so than the yellow spider mite. You can see where your harvest is going to occur about in mid-July for your early season varieties. Your late season varieties in here. So you're going to start looking for damage, early damage, particularly right in here, and that's the danger part. You know, the yellow spider mite can come on early in the season and cause this severe damage, cause leaf defoliation, and you're going to run into problems. We have quite a few registered caricides for red raspberry, and this is not all of them. This is just a select list. You can see we've got acromite, cane mite, savvy, some of your horticultural soaps, Vindex, and Seal. There is a correction down here. Vindex is an old product. It's not translaminar, but Zeal is. So if you look at those PHIs and REIs, you're going to see that they're pretty favorable. And look at the IRAC classes. IRAC is a different modes of action between these different products, and we've got about 5 different modes of action here. So it's really easy to rotate between these products, depending on what your target market is. Of course, you're going to have to look at MRLs for these materials if you're going to be exporting red raspberries. If you look at acromite, it's a contact insecticide, and it is active on the motile stages. Cane mite is also contact on the motile stages. Savvy is an IGR. It's going to be particularly effective against eggs and immatures, and it also causes some reproductive effects in the females. They're going to be laying infertile eggs. So you're going to have a slow decline of your population if you use Savvy. The soaps, of course, they're contact, and they can work on eggs and motiles as well. Vindex is contact, working on the motile stages, not translaminar. Zeal is translaminar. One of the problems with controlling spider mites on red raspberries is trying to get the material underneath the leaves, because that's where the spider mites are active. But in the case of a translaminar material, if you hit the leaf anywhere, it's going to pass through to the lower layers. So it's a lot easier to affect the spider mites using a product that's translaminar. Zeal is also an IGR. It's going to affect the eggs and the immatures. I'd like to talk just briefly about Eriophyids. Eriophyids are another type of mite that could be on your raspberries and caneberries too. They are not spider mites. They don't produce silk, and they're quite a bit different morphologically than your spider mites. Eriophyids only have 2 pairs of legs, and they're in the front. So these little animals are actually dragging their bodies across the bottom of the leaves. They're very, very tiny. I'd say that these are microscopic. They're going to be overwintering in things like cracks and crevices and bud scales, and then in the spring they're going to ride out at those shoots. Those shoots start growing out in the spring, and then from there they're going to transfer to the flowers, and then they're going to invade the drupelets from that point. And usually the damage occurs up at the base. There's one that really might be a problem sometimes with red raspberry, and that's a dryberry mite. There's another one that primarily affects your blackberry, and that's the redberry mite. But I think it can also be on both. We'll look at the biology of the dryberry mite. The feeding damage is outside of the berries. The young berries are going to turn brown. They're going to have a sun-scald appearance, and they're going to turn dry, hence the name dryberry mite. The females overwinter in colonies, in little groups, and in protected areas. The females can lay about 80 eggs a month, and they go through about 2 immature stages. And then you have these continuous overlapping generations. Management for dryberry mite or for these types of mites is going to be primarily your sulfur products or diazinon, but of course you're limited to 1 application a year with diazinon, so you might want to save it as your wild card for some other pest. We do a lot of miticide trials on our station in Mount Vernon. Here you can see Hollis is applying a miticide to our red raspberry field trials there. You might be able to see, depending if the light is right, here's a little bit of damage right here, spider mite damage. The upper canes are turning yellow. The way we do it is we use, of course, different plots, different reps, and we're going to replicate those numerous times, usually a post-to-post replication with a buffer in between. Not only do we use a backpack sprayer, but sometimes we also use over-the-row boom sprayer. And here's some of the different treatments that we've used. In this past year, we've done these different trials. So you've got Savvy, cane mite, Zeal, Fuji mite, Oberon, Nialta, and you're untreated. And if you look at the pre-treatment data here, you can see that the different treatments varied in the beginning for the amount of mites that were on the leaf. And then you can see that most of them drop down by 6 days. So you're going to have activity from these products at by about 6 days. But then most of them begin to climb up again. If you look at the case of Oberon, though, this one seems to be long-lasting because it goes down completely down to 0. You see on the right here, this is a a mite brushing machine, and this is how we evaluate these treatments. We're going to randomly select around 25 leaves for each treatment, and then we're going to brush them, we're going to put them through these whirling brushes, and that brushes everything off the leaf down into a rotating plate that's been covered with a sticky material like soap. And then from there, we're going to take that plate and we're going to put it under the microscope, and we're going to either count a section or the whole plate, depending on what the populations are. One thing I want to point out is that there's a lot more interest now in some of your late season raspberries. And the late season raspberries are typically grown under high tunnels. And anytime you change the habitat and you have a warmer environment like this, you're going to have potential for increase in spider mites early on. So it'd be a good thing to monitor more often for spider mites under these late season tunnels. So to summarize what I've said here, for the most part, we've got an adequate number of effective miticides, and they represent 5 different modes of action, so it's going to be easy to rotate between these products to stall off resistance. Resistance can be a problem. One of the things that we're seeing now is reports from California that there could be flare-ups in spider mites from this excessive use of insecticides, primarily pyrethroids and OP, rotational partners. And so you should stay vigilant against these. The problem is if the spider mites themselves become resistant, then there's going to be real problems. So we need to be vigilant against any type of resistance that could develop from heavy use of insecticides because of the other pest, spotted wing Drosophila. So thank you. And I don't know if we have time for any questions.
Yeah, we do.
This is an observation I was kind of taught by an agronomist that when you get to my age, you can't hardly see the little buggers on the leaf. And so by taking a match or a small torch and heating up the leaf, all of a sudden the dust starts moving.
Well, maybe you could try blowing on them too, Scott. Have you ever tried that?
Oh, no, I haven't. That's a new one.
That might be easier to carry around than a torch, but I've never done it myself, so I can't
Well, I was
guarantee
kind of
it,
surprised by the guy put a match underneath it, and all of a sudden these little look like dust started moving around on the leaf.
Gosh, well, I'll have to start carrying a cigarette lighter. Thanks, that's a cool tip.
Any other questions?
Hi, Bev. Just one
Hi.
question. Hi. You had said there was no reports of mite flare-ups that could be linked to SWD sprays?
Well, I said in California had been reports, but up here we haven't heard of any direct ones here in Washington. But we're really vigilant, and we've been thinking about including that idea in some proposals and doing some research on it. But what have you heard? What have you seen?
Well, I have nothing else to report on that either, but we haven't really explored it either. So, thanks.
Any other questions for Bev? Nope. Thanks, Bev.
Okay.